Let's talk about some of the proposals for using tech to reopen cities. First, you're probably wondering when your city will reopen, and how. This talk is a bit premature, particularly outside of California and Washington. But if you're wondering how public health officials will make that decision, start with this piece in the New York Times by Aaron E. Carroll. He lays out 4 crucial milestones that each jurisdiction will have to reach. Hospitals must be able to safely accommodate all COVID-19 patients. Supply has to catch up with demand. The country must be able to test everyone who needs testing, which will probably amount to around 750,000 tests a week. The state must be able to monitor confirmed cases and trace the contacts of the people that they may have exposed. This is where tech companies are being asked to play a role. The number of cases needs to fall every day for 14 days. So imagine the glorious day, hopefully not too many weeks in the future, when all of that is true in the place that you live. What happens next? The answer is much more complicated than the current state of affairs, which can be summarized in 3 words: stay at home. Who gets to work outside the home, how and where we test people and monitor new outbreaks, where we send people who may have been exposed, and what technologies we use to make all that happen, it's all very sketchy. In Politico, Adam Cancrun outlines one possible Trump administration response, working with multiple health companies to build a national coronavirus surveillance system. Cancrun describes it this way. The project, based on interviews with 7 tech executives, government officials and other people familiar with its contours, would draw on detailed information collected from multiple private sector databases. It would allow federal officials to continuously track elements like hospitals' bed availability and the flow of patients into specific emergency rooms across the country, thereby enabling the government to rush resources to parts of the country before they're hit by a surge of coronavirus cases. Note that this system could help us determine the first of the 4 milestones listed above, and not much else. Maybe the project would go further than what's described here, but a Trump spokesman denied any of it was happening at all. So, we'll see, I guess. Over in the European Union, authorities have been working on Milestone 3, a capacity for monitoring new outbreaks as lockdown restrictions lift. As Stephanie Bodoni and Natalia Drozdiak write in Bloomberg, this may prove challenging for a continent that prides itself on high standards for personal privacy. But the European Commission on Wednesday still issued guidelines for building apps that citizens can use on a voluntary basis to aid in the response. The fact that they are voluntary seems likely to limit their effectiveness, Bloomberg reports. Virus tracking apps could help authorities find people who have been exposed to COVID-19 so they can be isolated, and may ultimately lead to a way out of the restrictive social isolation measures that are keeping schools, shops and restaurants closed. While apps may be more precise than aggregated data in pinpointing potential contagions, they are being released on a voluntary basis to meet strict EU privacy rules. Researchers say they need to be adopted widely in order for an app to be helpful in tracking the virus, which may prove a challenge if people are wary of providing location information to governments or other organizations running the apps. But the place you really want to look, if you want to think about how the government and the tech industry could collaborate, is China. Dan Grover, a product designer and entrepreneur who formerly lived in Guangzhou, has an outstanding blog post up that documents how Chinese technology companies responded to the coronavirus crisis and argues that Silicon Valley can do more to help. I strive not to describe too many links in this newsletter as must-reads, but I truly believe that anyone who subscribes would get a lot of reading Grover's post. As someone who knows very little about Chinese government and industry, I had assumed that China's technological response to COVID-19 was a top-down mandate from Communist Party officials. In fact, as Grover tells it, there was a bottom-up effort from local municipalities and tech companies to devise response efforts that eventually got cobbled together into a national response. He writes, with waning numbers of new cases outside of heavily locked down Hubei, there was mounting desire to return to work in many cities. The Hangzhou municipal government issued guidelines to companies on how to gradually reopen, with different zones of the city on a schedule. Unlike other cities passing similar policies at the time, they also established a digital platform for reporting workers' health and gradually whitelisting more enterprises to reopen. Naturally, the system could only be accessed via Alipay and DingTalk. Alibaba is based in Hangzhou. Central to the system was the notion of a personal health QR code.